The storm had been threatening all afternoon, heavy clouds rolling in like an omen. Michael Turner drove faster than usual that night, eager to surprise his girls with hot chocolate before bedtime. He thought about their smiles, their little drawings they always left on his desk. He imagined their laughter when he walked in early. The radio crackled with storm warnings as he turned down Maple Street, but Michael barely heard them. His mind was already home, picturing Hannah showing off her latest masterpiece and Grace reciting the new poem she'd learned at school. These were the moments that made the long hours at the construction site worth it, the moments when he could be simply Daddy instead of the man everyone called strong because he had no choice. But when his headlights cut across the driveway, joy turned to horror. There, on the front porch, were his daughters, Hannah and Grace. They were only 7, small, delicate, still in their pajamas. Their hair was plastered to their faces, rain dripping into their wide eyes. They sat huddled together like 2 abandoned kittens, clutching each other for warmth. The sight hit Michael like a physical blow. His heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity before it exploded into overdrive. The truck door flew open before he'd even fully stopped, rain immediately soaking through his work shirt. Michael slammed the brakes and bolted from the car, his voice breaking. "Hannah! Grace!" The girls looked up through the downpour, their faces lighting up with desperate relief. They scrambled toward him, their tiny arms wrapping around his soaked shirt. Their bodies shook uncontrollably, not just from the cold but from fear. "Daddy," Hannah whispered, her lips trembling. She said, "We couldn't come inside until we learned our lesson." Michael froze. She. He didn't need to ask who. His eyes traveled to the house. Their house. The one he'd worked double shifts to buy. The one where Emily had painted the nursery yellow because they didn't know if they were having boys or girls. Upstairs, a light flickered in his bedroom window. Faint laughter, low, carefree, drifted through the storm. His gut twisted with a nauseating realization. The pieces clicked together like a nightmare puzzle. Olivia's sudden interest in him staying late at work. Her insistence that the girls needed more structure. The way she'd grown cold whenever he showed them affection. He carried his daughters to the truck, wrapped them in the emergency blanket, kissed their damp hair. "Stay here. Do not come out until I say, 'Daddy's here now.'" Hannah grabbed his sleeve. "Daddy, are you leaving us again?" The question shattered what was left of his composure. "Never," he whispered fiercely, cupping her small face. "I will never leave you again. I promise." As thunder cracked, Michael turned back toward the house, and in that moment, something inside him changed. He had trusted Olivia, the woman who promised to love his daughters as her own, but the storm had peeled away her mask. Tonight, he wasn't walking into a home. He was walking into the battlefield of betrayal. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael Turner had once been the definition of loyalty, a widower who'd built his life around hard work and fatherhood after his wife's sudden death. He had spent years alone. His entire world revolved around Hannah and Grace. Friends teased him about being too protective, but he didn't care. They were all he had left. The first 2 years after Emily's passing had been the hardest. Michael would wake at 3 a.m. to the sound of one of the girls crying, stumbling through the darkness to comfort nightmares about where Mommy went. He learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, burning dinner more times than he could count while trying to master Grace's favorite mac and cheese recipe. The laundry piled up. The house felt hollow, and some nights, after the girls were asleep, Michael would sit in his truck in the driveway and just cry. The loneliness was suffocating, not just for him, but for Hannah and Grace, who asked constantly when they would have a new mommy like their friend Sarah from school. And then Olivia walked in. She came like sunlight through a broken window, warm, reassuring, promising to make the house feel like a home again. Michael first met her at the grocery store on a particularly difficult Sunday. Hannah had thrown a tantrum in the cereal aisle. Grace was hiding behind his legs, and he was trying to juggle a shopping list while preventing a complete meltdown. That's when this elegant woman with kind eyes approached. "Oh, what beautiful daughters," she said softly, kneeling to Grace's level. "What's your favorite color, sweetheart?" Grace whispered. "Purple. Like Mommy's flowers." Olivia's expression softened with what seemed like genuine compassion. "Purple is magical. Do you know that lavender can help you sleep better? Maybe your daddy could plant some by your window." Michael found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. They talked in that aisle for 20 minutes. Olivia shared that she'd lost her own mother young, that she understood how hard it was for children to navigate grief. She didn't push, didn't pry. She simply listened. When they parted, she pressed a small lavender sachet into Grace's palm. "For sweet dreams," she whispered. At first, she was gentle. She braided the girls' hair, read them bedtime stories, brought them little gifts. Every Tuesday, she'd appear with fresh cookies or a new coloring book. She never overstayed her welcome, never imposed. When Hannah skinned her knee, Olivia cleaned the wound with such tenderness that the little girl stopped crying and asked, "Will you kiss it better like Mommy used to?" She told Michael, "You've carried the weight long enough, let me share it." For a man who had been both mother and father, it was disarming. The girls would run to the window when her car pulled up, squealing with excitement. "Olivia's here, Olivia's here." They'd show her their drawings, their new dance moves, their loose teeth, and she would clap and coo and make them feel like the most special children in the world. Slowly, he let her in. It felt like breathing again. The girls wanted to believe too. They tried, clinging to the idea of a woman who might ease the ache of losing their mother. Hannah drew pictures of Olivia with angel wings beside their mom. Grace whispered bedtime prayers, including her name. "God bless Daddy and Hannah and Olivia, who makes Daddy smile again." Michael found himself looking forward to Olivia's visits. She brought order to chaos, laughter to silence. She stayed for dinner, helped with homework, even folded laundry without being asked. When he proposed 6 months later, it felt like the natural progression of healing. The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends. Hannah and Grace wore matching lavender dresses and carried white roses. They walked down the aisle ahead of Olivia, scattering petals and giggling when Grace tripped slightly. Michael's brother Jake pulled him aside during the reception. "You sure about this, Mike? It's just fast. And the girls are finally adjusting to life without Emily." Michael watched Olivia dancing with his daughters, spinning them in circles as they laughed. "Look at them, Jake. They're happy. We're all happy. Emily would want this." But small cracks appeared early. Within weeks of the honeymoon, subtle changes began. When Michael wasn't home, Olivia's tone changed. What looked like kindness became control. "Don't bother your father with every little thing," she'd snap when Hannah tried to show her a drawing. "You're too needy. He works hard for this family. Learn to be grateful." The girls would shrink under her gaze. When they tried to tell Michael, he dismissed it. "She's just adjusting. It's not easy stepping into this role. Give her time." But Olivia wasn't adjusting. She was revealing herself. The transformation was gradual, masterful in its subtlety. First, it was the small rules. No running in the house, your father needs quiet when he gets home. No asking for seconds at dinner. Good girls finish what they're given. No getting up after bedtime, not even for water. Then the rules became punishments. "Since you can't remember to put your toys away, Hannah, you'll spend the afternoon organizing the entire playroom. Grace, if you're going to cry like a baby, you can sit in the corner until you're ready to act your age." The girls began to walk on eggshells. They spoke in whispers when Olivia was near. They learned to clean up after themselves before she noticed messes. They stopped asking for hugs. Her jabs grew sharper. At dinner, if Hannah spilled her juice, Olivia clapped slowly. "Bravo, you managed to ruin another meal." When Grace stumbled over her reading, Olivia smirked. "Maybe you should let your sister do the smart things." The humiliations piled up, hidden behind closed doors. Michael's work schedule grew more demanding as his construction company landed a major contract. Olivia encouraged his long hours. "Don't worry about us. The girls and I are bonding. We're fine." But they weren't fine. The twins began to grow quieter, their once bubbly chatter replaced with nervous whispers. They clung to each other more, finding comfort only in their bond. Their teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed the change. Hannah's artwork went from bright, cheerful scenes to dark, stormy pictures. Grace, who used to raise her hand for every question, now sat silent in the back row. When Mrs. Henderson called the house, Olivia answered sweetly, "Oh, they're just adjusting to having a mother figure again. It's a big change, but we're working through it together." The teacher noted the call but couldn't shake her unease. And when they asked for their father's attention, Olivia made sure they learned their place. "Not now, your dad's tired. Go to your room. Adults are talking. Stop being clingy. You're embarrassing yourselves." To Michael, it looked like harmless boundaries. To the girls, it was the slow erasure of their voices. They stopped showing him their drawings. They stopped running to him when he came home. They stopped asking for bedtime stories. Michael noticed, but Olivia had an explanation for everything. They're growing up, becoming more independent. Isn't that what we want? They're learning respect. Structure is good for them. You can't coddle them forever, Michael. The world isn't going to baby them. Each excuse chipped away at his instincts. He wanted to believe that his daughters were simply maturing, not that they were being systematically broken down. The storm on the night of his return wasn't the first storm they'd endured. It was simply the first he had been forced to see. But there had been others. The night he worked late on the Morrison project, and Olivia locked them in their room for being disrespectful when they asked for a glass of water. The afternoon she made them stand in the backyard for an hour because Grace accidentally knocked over a plant. The morning she threw away Hannah's favorite stuffed rabbit, the one Emily had given her, claiming it was dirty and inappropriate for a big girl. Each cruelty was carefully timed for when Michael wasn't there to witness it. Each punishment was followed by threats. "If you tell your father, he'll be very disappointed in you. Daddy doesn't want to hear you complain. He has enough problems. Good daughters don't tattle. Only bad daughters cause trouble for their families." The twins learned silence. They learned to suffer quietly. They learned that their pain didn't matter. Until the night everything changed. Michael's boots slammed against the soaked pavement as thunder rattled the sky. Rain poured down his back, but it wasn't the storm outside that chilled him. It was the storm in his chest. His daughter's trembling voices echoed in his ears. She said we couldn't come inside until we learned our lesson. Every step toward the front door was heavier than the last. His mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. How long had they been out there? How many times had this happened before? What kind of monster had he brought into their lives? Inside, the house was lit as though nothing were wrong. Warm lamps glowed in the living room. Soft music drifted faintly from upstairs. To any passerby, it looked like a home at peace. But Michael knew better. He noticed things now that he'd missed before. The girls' shoes, neatly lined up by the door, but soaking wet, as if they'd been forced to remove them outside. Their little jackets hung on the hooks, dripping puddles onto the hardwood floor Emily had loved so much. A plate of cookies sat untouched on the kitchen counter. The girl's favorite chocolate chip, probably baked to maintain the facade of the caring stepmother. He unlocked the door with shaking hands. The familiar hallway stretched before him, lined with family photos he had once cherished. His wedding picture with Emily, her radiant smile captured forever. The twins' first day of school, gap-toothed grins and backpacks too big for their tiny frames. Last Christmas morning, when they still believed in magic, memories of love and laughter, now mocking him as he realized how blind he'd been. The house felt different now, tainted. The walls that once echoed with Emily's laughter and the girls' joy now seemed to whisper accusations. How could you not see? How could you let this happen? How could you fail them when they needed you most? Then he heard it. Laughter. Carefree. From upstairs. Not the innocent giggling of children. but the low, intimate laughter of adults without a care in the world. Adults who had abandoned two 7-year-olds in a storm. Michael's blood turned to ice. He climbed slowly, each creak of the staircase punctuated by the pounding of his heart. The same stairs where Hannah had lost her first tooth, where Grace had sat crying after her first nightmare, where Emily used to chase the girls during their bedtime games. Now they led him toward a betrayal so complete, it stole his breath. At the top, the bedroom door was cracked open. The glow of lamplight spilled into the hall. He could hear voices now, Olivia's sultry laugh, a man's deeper chuckle. Michael's hand trembled as he reached for the door. Part of him wanted to turn away, to pretend he hadn't seen his daughters outside, to live in the comfortable lie a little longer. But then he remembered their wet faces, their chattering teeth, their desperate relief when they saw him. He pushed the door wider. And there she was. Olivia. She lounged across his bed. The bed he'd shared with Emily, where the girls used to pile in for Saturday morning cartoons, in silk pajamas he'd never seen before. A glass of wine sat on Emily's old nightstand. A man Michael had never seen before sat beside her, shirt half unbuttoned, laughing at something she whispered. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. Candles flickered on the dresser. An open bottle of expensive wine, not the kind they kept in the house, sat on the floor beside discarded clothes. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a planned evening, a celebration perhaps of everything she'd gotten away with. Michael's chest tightened, his fists clenched, but he didn't burst in with rage. His voice when it came was colder than the storm outside. "Where are my daughters?" Olivia flinched at the sound, nearly spilling her wine. Her eyes darted toward him, wide for a moment, before narrowing into defiance. The mask slipped just for an instant, revealing something cruel underneath. "Oh, Michael, you're back early," she said flatly, as though she had nothing to hide. "They're fine. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. The word hung in the air like poison. Michael stepped fully into the doorway, his soaked shirt clinging to his frame. Water dripped from his hair onto the carpet, the same carpet where the girls used to build blanket forts. They're outside, in the storm, shivering in their pajamas. Why? The stranger shifted uneasily, clearly realizing he'd walked into something bigger than an affair. He cleared his throat, reaching for his shirt. "I should go." Michael's glare cut through him like a blade. "You'll leave when I say you can leave." The man froze, understanding that he wasn't just witnessing a domestic dispute. He was witnessing the moment a father's world shattered. Olivia set her glass down and rose slowly, crossing her arms. Her silk pajamas caught the lamplight, a stark contrast to his daughter's soaked cotton ones. "You don't understand. They wouldn't listen. I told them bedtime, but they whined. They cried. They needed discipline." "Discipline?" Michael's voice cracked with fury. "They're children. They're my children. And you left them in a thunderstorm?" The rain pounded harder against the windows, as if the storm itself were angry. Olivia scoffed, rolling her eyes with practiced disdain. "Oh, stop. You coddle them too much. They'll grow up weak, always clinging to you. A little rain doesn't hurt anyone." "A little rain?" Michael's voice rose, barely controlled. "They're 7 years old, Olivia. 7. They were terrified, cold, abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect them when I wasn't here." "Protected?" Olivia laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "From what? Learning that the world doesn't revolve around them? That they can't always get what they want by crying?" At that, something in Michael snapped. He slammed his hand against the doorframe, the sound making the stranger flinch. "You think this is about rain? My daughters, Emily's daughters, were abandoned, alone, in fear, while you sat in my bed, drinking wine with some stranger." For the first time, Olivia's mask cracked completely, her face twisted with years of buried resentment. She sneered, stepping closer with dangerous confidence. "Don't you dare bring Emily into this. She's gone. I'm here. I'm the one who's had to deal with your grief, your daughters, your endless devotion to a ghost." The words hit Michael like physical blows. "Ghost?" he whispered, his voice deadly quiet. "Emily was my wife, the mother of my children. She was a memory!" Olivia screamed, her composure finally shattering. "A perfect little memory that you worship while ignoring the woman standing right in front of you. Do you think I don't see how you look at her picture every night? How you tell the girls stories about what mommy would have wanted?" Her face was flushed now, years of jealousy pouring out. "I've tried to replace her, to be better than her, and nothing I do matters because you're all still in love with a dead woman." Michael's breath caught, his fury boiling into something sharper, colder. "You think Emily was a ghost? She's the reason I survived losing her. She's the reason I live every day for Hannah and Grace. And you turned their home into a prison." The stranger muttered, "I really should leave." He stood, fumbling with his jacket, desperate to escape the erupting volcano of a marriage imploding. Michael didn't stop him this time. The man bolted past, down the stairs and out into the rain, leaving only the storm and the silence that followed. Michael turned back to Olivia. She was shaking now, but it wasn't regret. It was anger, pure, undiluted rage at being exposed. "Be careful, Michael. If you try to get rid of me, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. I'll ruin you, your business, your reputation. Even your daughters will hate you when I'm done." Her voice was cold, calculated. This wasn't the heat of the moment. This was a woman revealing her true nature. "I'll tell them how you neglect them for work, how you're an unfit father, how you can't handle 2 little girls without falling apart." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll tell them about the drinking, the nights you cried in the garage, the times you screamed at God for taking Emily. Who do you think they'll believe? The grieving widower or the devoted stepmother?" Michael stared at her for a long moment, his voice calm but deadly steady. "The only thing I regret is ever letting you into their lives." The silence between them was louder than thunder. Olivia's face twisted, torn between rage and fear. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her threats held no power over a man who had already lost everything that mattered. Downstairs, the storm beat harder against the windows. Hannah and Grace sat wrapped in blankets waiting for their father. And for the first time in years, Michael understood the truth. The family he had built with Emily's memory was worth everything. The woman before him? She was worth nothing. This night, the storm, the betrayal, the cruelty, would mark the end of Olivia's hold on their lives. Justice was coming, and it would be merciless. The storm may have ended outside, but inside Michael's life, the thunder still roared. The next morning brought a different kind of tempest. Michael sat at his kitchen table, the same table where Emily used to help the girls with homework, now covered with legal documents and phone numbers. His daughters ate their cereal in unusual silence, stealing glances at him with worried eyes. They knew something monumental had shifted. Olivia had left before dawn, taking only a suitcase and her wounded pride. Her parting words still echoed, "You'll regret this, Michael. I'll make sure of it." But Michael wasn't afraid anymore. He was determined. The first call was to his lawyer, David Chen, a family friend who had handled Emily's estate. "David, I need your help, and I need it today." Within hours, the legal machinery was in motion. Emergency custody filings, restraining orders, documentation of emotional abuse. But Olivia struck first. By Tuesday, she had hired Margaret Blackwood, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the county. A woman known for turning messy divorces into character assassinations. The papers were served to Michael at his job site, in front of his crew. Abandonment, emotional neglect, unfit parenting. The accusations stung, not because they were true, but because they attacked the one thing he'd built his life around, being a good father. Olivia was claiming that Michael's grief had made him unstable, that his long work hours constituted abandonment, that the girls needed stability only she could provide. She painted herself as the devoted stepmother trying to save two little girls from a broken man. Days later, the courtroom was filled with the hum of whispered curiosity. Word had spread through their small town like wildfire. The Turner case. The construction worker whose new wife had betrayed him. The twin girls caught in the middle. Neighbors, colleagues, even strangers sat shoulder to shoulder, eager to witness the scandal that had shaken their small community. Some came out of genuine concern for the girls, others came for the drama. All eyes were on the families as they took their seats. At the front sat Olivia, polished and poised in a sleek black dress, her lips curved into the faintest smirk. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She had transformed herself back into the woman Michael had first met, kind, elegant, sympathetic. To the crowd, she wanted to look like a misunderstood wife, a victim of exaggeration. But Michael saw the steel in her eyes, the same defiance that had stared him down that night. Behind her sat her sister and mother, flanking her like protective shields. They whispered encouraging words and shot daggers at Michael with their eyes. Margaret Blackwood sat beside them, a folder thick with character assassination ready to deploy. Michael took his seat across the aisle, his daughters sitting just behind him. Hannah wore her best dress, the blue one Emily had bought for last year's school pictures. Grace clutched a small teddy bear, the replacement for the one Olivia had thrown away. They had been prepared by David Chen for what was coming. They might ask you hard questions, he'd explained gently, but all you have to do is tell the truth. The truth is powerful. Michael leaned down and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. No one will hurt you again." Grace squeezed his arm, her wide brown eyes filled with fear, but also a spark of courage. Hannah straightened in her chair, her small jaw set with determination that reminded Michael heartbreakingly of Emily. The judge entered, Judge Patricia Wells, a stern woman in her 60s, known for her no-nonsense approach to family court. She had seen every kind of custody battle, every manipulation, every genuine cry for help. Her reputation was built on cutting through lies to protect children. This court is now in session. The air grew thick with tension. Margaret Blackwood rose first, her voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, my client, Olivia Turner, stands before you as a woman who opened her heart to two motherless children. She gave up her own dreams, her own career, to create a stable home for these girls." She gestured toward Hannah and Grace, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "These children lost their mother tragically young. They needed structure, guidance, and yes, sometimes difficult love. Mrs. Turner provided that while their father worked increasingly long hours, leaving the burden of daily care entirely on her shoulders." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. On the night in question, the children had been defiant and disrespectful for hours. Mrs. Turner, overwhelmed and exhausted, made a momentary lapse in judgment. She sent them outside for a few minutes to calm down, a brief timeout that unfortunately coincided with unexpected rain. Michael's hands clenched into fists. Momentary lapse. A few minutes. He wanted to stand and scream the truth, but David Chen's hand on his shoulder kept him seated. "Meanwhile," Blackwood continued, "Mr. Turner arrived home in a jealous rage, having discovered that his wife had a friend visiting. Unable to handle the reality that she had a life beyond caring for his children, he created this elaborate narrative of abuse to justify his own inadequacies as a parent." The lawyer paused for effect, letting her words sink in. "Mrs. Turner doesn't seek to destroy this family. She seeks to heal it. She requests joint custody, shared time with the children she has come to love as her own, and the chance to continue providing the maternal guidance these motherless girls desperately need." When she sat down, the courtroom buzzed with uncertainty. Her story was plausible, sympathetic, designed to make Olivia the victim. Then Michael's lawyer rose. David Chen was a different kind of advocate, quieter, more deliberate, but with a reputation for devastating cross-examinations. His voice cut like glass through the courtroom's murmur. Your Honor, this case isn't about a momentary lapse in judgment. It's about a pattern of calculated cruelty disguised as discipline. It's about a woman who manipulated a grieving father and terrorized two innocent children. He walked toward the witness stand, his voice growing stronger. The defense would have you believe that leaving 7-year-old children outside in a severe thunderstorm, children in their pajamas, children who were found soaking wet and trembling with fear, was a brief time out that coincidentally coincided with rain. His tone sharpened. The Weather Service issued severe storm warnings that afternoon. Any responsible adult would have known that rain was coming. Any caring guardian would have brought children inside the moment the first drops fell. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Instead, Mrs. Turner locked the door. She turned off the porch light. She drew the curtain so she wouldn't have to see their faces pressed against the glass, begging to come home. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. She didn't make a momentary mistake. She made a deliberate choice. While Hannah and Grace Turner sat abandoned on their own front porch, Mrs. Turner entertained another man in their father's bed. In the bed where their mother once told them bedtime stories. The emotional weight of his words was crushing. This isn't about jealousy or inadequate parenting. This is about two little girls who lost their mother and trusted a woman who promised to love them, a woman who instead taught them that love is conditional, that safety is not guaranteed, and that their own voices don't matter. The judge leaned forward, her expression grave. We will hear from the children. The room held its breath as Hannah and Grace were called forward. Tiny shoes clicked against the wooden floor as they climbed into the witness chairs, barely tall enough to see over the desk. A court reporter adjusted the microphone, speaking gently. Can you state your names for the record, sweethearts? Hannah Rose Turner, the older twin said clearly, her voice stronger than anyone expected. Grace Emily Turner, the younger added, her teddy bear clutched tightly. The clerk swore them in gently, and then David Chen approached with the careful tenderness of a man who understood that these children's words would change everything. Hannah, Grace, can you tell us what happened that night? Grace's little voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. She said we were bad. We asked for one more story. Mommy used to tell us stories. She got mad. She said Daddy doesn't want to hear us cry. Tears began to fall in the gallery. She said if we told, something bad would happen. Hannah's lip quivered, but she lifted her chin with remarkable courage. She locked us out. It was raining. We were cold. We hugged each other so we wouldn't be scared. Her voice broke slightly. We thought Daddy wasn't coming back. We thought maybe we were too bad to live inside anymore. The courtroom was silent, except for the muffled sobs of strangers. She turned her head toward Michael, eyes brimming with trust. But he did. He always comes back for us. Margaret Blackwood shifted uncomfortably, realizing that cross-examining traumatized children would only make her client look worse. Children can be... The judge cut her off sharply. Enough. Judge Wells had heard enough rehearsed testimony to spot authenticity when she saw it. These children weren't coached. They were simply telling their truth. Then, teachers were called. Mrs. Henderson took the stand, her voice heavy with regret. I noticed changes in both girls shortly after the new school year began. Hannah, who used to be vibrant and outgoing, became withdrawn. Her artwork changed from bright, happy scenes to dark, stormy pictures. She pulled out a folder of Hannah's drawings. This one shows a house in a storm. 2 small figures outside, 1 larger figure inside with the door closed. When I asked Hannah about it, she said, "Sometimes we have to wait outside when we're bad." The judge examined the drawing, her expression growing graver. Grace stopped participating in class. She used to raise her hand for every question, but she became silent, fearful of making mistakes. When I called home to discuss my concerns, Mrs. Turner assured me everything was fine, but the children's behavior suggested otherwise. Neighbors testified to seeing the girls outside in the rain on more than one occasion. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door spoke through tears. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to interfere. I saw them on the porch during that bad storm last month, but Olivia said they were just playing. I should have known. I should have done something. Every piece of testimony chipped away at Olivia's carefully built mask. The pediatrician who treated Grace for a persistent cold testified that the child had mentioned getting wet a lot. The school counselor described how both girls had begun showing signs of anxiety and depression. Even the mailman mentioned seeing the children outside at unusual times. By the time Michael took the stand, the air was thick with tension. He stood tall, though his voice shook with emotion. Your Honor, I buried my wife 3 years ago. Since then, my daughters have been my only purpose. They are my heart, my reason for getting up every morning, my reason for building a future. He paused, swallowing hard. I thought bringing Olivia into our lives would give them a mother's warmth. Instead, it gave them fear. His voice grew stronger, fueled by paternal fury. Do you know what it feels like, Your Honor, to come home and find your children, your entire world, abandoned in the storm while the woman you trusted lay in your bed with another man? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael's voice cracked with raw emotion. I will never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, but I will spend the rest of my life making sure they never feel unsafe again. He looked directly at Olivia, his gaze unwavering. Those girls lost their mother. They didn't deserve to lose their childhood, too. The courtroom erupted in whispers, the weight of his words settling like a stone. Margaret Blackwood rose for cross-examination, but she was fighting a losing battle. Mr. Turner, isn't it true that you work 60-hour weeks? That you've left the primary care of your daughters to my client? Michael's jaw tightened. I work hard to provide for my family, but I have never, not once, put my daughters in danger. Every hour I work is for them. And isn't it true that you've struggled with depression since your wife's death? That you've been to therapy? Yes, Michael said without shame. I sought help because I wanted to be the best father I could be. Because Hannah and Grace deserved a parent who was healing, not broken. The lawyer pressed on. My client has suggested that your emotional state makes you unreliable. That perhaps you're misremembering events due to your grief. At this, Michael stood straighter. Ma'am, grief may have clouded my judgment about your client's true nature, but it never ever made me hallucinate my daughters sitting in a thunderstorm, soaked to the bone and terrified. His voice rose with conviction. I know what I saw. This courtroom knows what they heard from my daughters' own mouths, and God knows that your client chose cruelty over compassion when it mattered most. Blackwood had no response. The damage was done. Finally, the judge's gavel came down. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court finds the allegations against Olivia Turner to be substantiated and deeply troubling. Judge Wells's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The pattern of emotional abuse, culminating in the abandonment of minor children during a severe weather event, demonstrates a complete failure in her duty of care. She looked directly at Olivia, whose confident smirk had long since vanished. Olivia Turner, your actions show cruelty, negligence, and betrayal. You will not walk away from this unscathed. The judge's voice grew harder. Custody of Hannah and Grace Turner remains with their father. You are stripped of all spousal claims to marital property. This court grants Mr. Turner a full divorce on grounds of abandonment and emotional cruelty. Olivia's face went white. Her dreams of financial security, of the comfortable life she'd married into, crumbled in an instant. Furthermore, Judge Wells continued, you are hereby ordered to have no contact with these children. No visits, no calls, no letters. You have forfeited any right to be part of their lives. The courtroom was dead silent. This court finds in favor of Michael Turner. The gavel came down with finality. Olivia's composure shattered completely. She stood abruptly, her voice shrill. This isn't fair. He'll regret this. You'll all see. He can't handle those girls alone. They'll end up damaged and broken just like him. Her sister tried to pull her down, but Olivia's mask had completely fallen away. Those children will never be normal, never. And when they're old enough to understand, they'll blame him for destroying their chance at having a real mother. The bailiff stepped forward, silencing her outburst, but the damage was already done. The mask had fallen. The community saw her for what she truly was, a woman whose first thought, even in defeat, was to wound innocent children. Judge Wells's expression was thunderous. "Mrs. Turner, your outburst confirms this court's decision. You have shown even now that your primary concern is not the welfare of these children but your own wounded pride." The bailiff escorted Olivia from the courtroom as she continued to rage. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. The doors closed, cutting off her threats. Michael turned, kneeling beside his daughters. They threw their arms around his neck, their tears soaking into his shirt. For the first time in months he smiled, not out of triumph, but out of relief. Justice had been served. Hannah whispered against his ear, "Are we safe now, Daddy?" "Yes, baby girl. We're safe. We're finally safe." And as they walked out of that courthouse hand in hand, the storm that once threatened to destroy them had instead left them stronger than ever. The courthouse doors closed behind them with a heavy echo, but for Michael, it sounded like freedom. Outside, the storm clouds had parted, sunlight breaking through as if the heavens themselves had witnessed what happened inside. He held Hannah's hand in one, Grace's in the other. Their little fingers clutched tightly, afraid to let go. But this time, they didn't have to. The walk to the truck felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Neighbors and strangers who had sat in the courtroom stepped aside, some even offering gentle nods or whispered, "We're so glad justice was done." Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, approached with tears in her eyes. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have trusted my instincts." Michael shook his head, his voice gentle. "You spoke up when it mattered. That's what counts." For weeks, Michael had felt like the whole world was watching him unravel. Now, for the first time, he felt the weight lift. The community that had once whispered about his difficult situation now saw him as a father who had fought for his children and won. That evening back at home, the air felt different. The house seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had suffocated them for months. Michael knelt down and gathered cleaning supplies. "We're going to make this house ours again," he announced. The girls watched as he stripped the bed where Olivia had betrayed them, replacing every sheet, every pillowcase. They helped him take down the curtains she'd chosen, dark, heavy drapes that had blocked out the light. Together they hung the bright yellow ones Emily had loved, the ones that made the whole room feel like sunshine. Grace found her courage and asked, "Daddy, can we put Mommy's picture back on the nightstand?" Emily's photo had been accidentally moved to the closet weeks ago. Michael's eyes filled as he placed it back in its rightful place. "She belongs here. She's still part of our family." Hannah joined them on the bed, studying her mother's face. "I remember her voice when she sang to us." "I remember how she smelled like flowers," Grace added softly. Michael pulled them close. "Tell me more. Tell me everything you remember." And for the first time in over a year, they talked about Emily without fear. They shared memories Olivia had forbidden them to speak. They laughed about the time she tried to make pancakes and burned them black. They cried about how much they missed her goodnight kisses. The silence that used to suffocate now carried peace. Hannah curled up with her sketchbook, drawing stick figures of herself, her sister, and her father. 3 smiling faces under a bright sun. Grace read aloud from her favorite book, stumbling over words but grinning when Michael gently corrected her. There were no interruptions, no harsh glances, no threats disguised as discipline. Just the sound of a home learning how to laugh again. Michael watched them and thought of Emily, his late wife. He whispered to her picture on the mantel, "I failed once, but never again. I promise." His eyes glistened, but for the first time, his tears carried hope instead of regret. The healing wasn't immediate. There were still nights when the girls woke up crying, expecting to find Olivia's angry face in their doorway. There were moments when they flinched at loud voices, when they asked permission for things they'd always been free to do. But Michael was patient. He left work early every day for 2 weeks, rebuilding their sense of security. He cooked their favorite meals, read extra bedtime stories, and reminded them constantly that they were loved, wanted, and safe. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist, helped them process their trauma. Children are resilient, she assured Michael during one of their sessions, but they need consistency, patience, and the knowledge that their father will always choose them first. That's easy, Michael replied, watching his daughters play in the corner of the office. They are my first choice, always. Meanwhile, Olivia's fall was swift and complete. Word of the court proceedings spread through their tight-knit community like wildfire. The same people who once admired her charm now turned their backs. Friends unfriended her on social media. Neighbors crossed the street when she walked by. Her part-time job at the local boutique quietly let her go. Restructuring, they called it. The man from that night disappeared entirely, wanting no part of the scandal. Whispers of the woman who left children in the storm followed her everywhere. Financially, the divorce stripped her of everything she'd schemed for. The house, the cars, the comfortable life she'd thought she'd secured, all gone. Her lawyer's fees consumed what little savings she had. Socially, her name became a warning, not a badge. Other divorced women in town avoided her, not wanting to be associated with someone who could harm children. She had played her hand perfectly, she thought, but she had underestimated the power of truth and the fierce love of a father. She had lost it all. Michael didn't revel in her ruin. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about safety, about showing his daughters that cruelty never wins in the end, about proving that love, real love, fights back. Weeks turned to months, and slowly, healing stitched itself into their daily lives. The twins began to sleep soundly again, no longer waking in fear. They stopped tiptoeing around the house. They started bringing friends over for play dates. They argued like sisters should, about crayons and snacks, not about surviving the night. They laughed louder, hugged tighter, and filled the house with the kind of joy Michael thought he had lost forever. Mrs. Henderson, their teacher, called with an update that made Michael's heart soar. Hannah raised her hand 12 times today. Grace read an entire paragraph without stumbling. They're coming back to themselves. Michael hired a babysitter, Mrs. Chen, David's aunt, a grandmother of 6 with endless patience. She came 3 afternoons a week, not because the girls needed watching, but because they needed to learn that other adults could be trusted. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt their faith in grown-ups. The girls started a tradition of leaving thank you drawings on Mrs. Chen's dashboard. Because she's nice to us even when Daddy's not here, Grace explained. One evening, 6 months after the court case, Michael found Hannah writing in a diary, something Dr. Martinez had suggested. "What are you writing about, sweetheart?" Hannah looked up, her eyes clear and bright. "About how brave we were, about how you saved us, about how we're not scared anymore." She showed him the page. In careful 7-year-old handwriting she had written, "My daddy is a hero. He chose us over the mean lady. Now we can be happy again." Grace appeared beside them, having overheard. "Daddy, can we have pancakes for dinner, like Mommy used to make?" "But burned ones," Hannah added with a giggle. "Because that's how she made them." They cooked together that night, laughing as Michael deliberately burned the edges just like Emily used to do. The girls set the table with Emily's good plates, the ones Olivia had declared too fancy for everyday use. Tonight, they were perfect. As they ate their slightly burned pancakes by candlelight, Grace asked the question that had been building for months. "Daddy, are we going to be okay forever now?" Michael reached across the table, taking both their hands. "Forever and always, I promise." And for the first time since Emily's death, that promise felt unbreakable. On a quiet Sunday morning, Grace climbed into his lap and whispered, "Daddy, can we stop being afraid now?" Michael kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the same kind Emily used to use. "Yes, baby girl." We don't have to be afraid anymore. And that was the real victory. Not what Olivia lost, but what his daughters regained. Childhood, trust, and the unshakable knowledge that their father chose them above everything else. The house filled with new memories. Birthday parties with school friends. Christmas morning with presents under a tree the girls had decorated themselves. Bedtime stories that lasted as long as they wanted. Saturday morning cartoons in Michael's bed, the same bed where Betrayal had once lived, now reclaimed by love. The story didn't end with thunder. It ended with laughter. And sometimes that's the greatest justice of all. Hannah and Grace learned that storms pass, that love fights back, that some fathers will move heaven and earth to protect what matters most. Michael learned that trusting his instincts meant trusting his daughters' voices, that being too protective was sometimes exactly enough, that Emily's love lived on in every choice he made for their children. The town learned that behind closed doors, cruelty can wear a beautiful mask. But truth, when it finally breaks free, shines brighter than any deception. And in a small house on Maple Street, where yellow curtains dance in the morning breeze and children's laughter echoes through every room, a father and his daughters prove that love, real, fierce, protective love, always finds a way to win. The storm had passed. The family had survived. And they were stronger than ever before. What would you have done if you were Michael? Walked away that night or fought until justice was served? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Before we dive deeper, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories.